All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a rather different edition of the Spiral Marketing Podcast. For this episode, we thought it'd be fun to bring in a few guests in the form of a workshop. So today I'm about to bring in Jessica Featherson and Marcus Isaiah from the Squeeze Network. They're co-founders. And before I do, I just want to say that I met them in a workshop, which is kind of ironic, but the workshop was fantastic. It was about visioning. And we had fun. I came out, thought this was really helpful and it'd be good on a podcast, but that's not what this podcast is about per se. We can talk about doing that on a new one, on a future edition. But for this one, we thought it'd be fun to actually come through and help them do an exercise on their own marketing. So with that being said, I'd like to bring in Jessica Featherson and Marcus Isaiah. Come on in, folks.
Hey, Carl.
Hey, Carl.
Thank
How
you.
are you?
Good.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure. This is going to be fun. So I'm going to step out here and allow you guys to just give a little bit of a brief introduction of yourselves here and the Squeeze Network.
Sure.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Thanks again for having us, Carl. So my name is Jessica Featherson, and this is
Marcus Isaiah.
And together we are
the Squeeze Network.
Exactly. So Squeeze started out in 2016 as a vision board party. And now we're actively morphing into a community of creatives, entrepreneurs, visionaries, just coming together in support and creating platforms and opportunities to collaborate and to help, individuals in their own endeavors, whether it's creative projects or businesses, startups, and things like that. So we I'll let you go.
We started out with what is a vision board. Me and Jessica both share vision boards. That's what we had in common. So we thought, how could we turn this into some type of event or project or workshop to bring people together, to explore those thoughts, to manifest the things that they want out of their family life, out of their personal life, out of their careers. So thus comes Squeeze, Vision Board Soiree, and that's what we started. Now developed into Squeeze, a vision board experience, taking more risk and more activities and bringing those things together to put them into one circling effect, which is your life, essentially.
So what I thought it'd be helpful to touch base with and let the viewers know is that you all are creatives.
Yes.
You all are your own creatives, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we can even talk through it.
Okay, cool.
Right. So you all are dancers.
Dancers,
actors,
creative
directors,
singers. We do it all. We are performers. So I guess performance artists. And so
fitness
instructors
coaches.
as well. Yeah. So we went to high school together. We danced together at Performing Arts High School, Suitland High School in Forestville, Maryland. So we spent much of our time just always dancing. And I think, being a dancer, that creative outlet, it still translates in my adult life. Well, I'm still an educator in the dance field. But that has also trickled into culinary art and, again, creative directing. So it's just expanded my, reach and capacity of creativity. Outstanding. And I think that's a helpful backdrop in a way for a variety of reasons. But I think in terms of this episode, we had a conversation and you mentioned that what would be helpful from a marketing perspective is to get to know your own customer a little bit better. Exactly. And you'd also mentioned that you're interested in supporting creatives like yourselves, which makes a lot of sense, right? So it's just a matter of going through a little exercise and determining what would be most helpful in terms of your ideal client profile. Exactly. Okay. Perfect. So with that, I think we can get started. Yeah, right. Let's do it.
All right. The way to start with customer profiling is, so for background, we're looking at who your ideal client profile is, right? So it's not just the big umbrella. It's really if you were going to spend money on marketing to somebody, and this is the kind of customer that is perfect. They're the person who's more likely or not to spend money on your products and services and be kind of the leader. They have the ideal client profile. So to think that through, you really want to consider first your goals. Okay. Right? So let's talk. We don't need to write them all, but let's talk about it. So go ahead.
I think, go ahead. You something burning on your tongue. I see it.
That's what I was like, dang, what are his goals? To have a sold out event, right? So a big event where it's catering to a lot of people at one time. I know that's one of my goals.
Okay. I think
get more specific. I think I need the appropriate questions.
Well, it's good. So don't feel like you need a perfect answer right now. This is, we're throwing stuff on the board, and we can narrow it down deeper, right? Okay. But knowing that you want to throw a big event, that's your gut instinct, and that's kind of the main vision and driver. Is that correct, or is it bigger and broader than that?
I think bigger, or I think that's one avenue, right? Mm-hmm. So we have events, plural, because I think throughout, as we start to develop, we want to have ongoing programs and events. So meaningful, impactful events and programs. I think that's one goal, where people like, I need this, so filling some sort of gap or some sort of like, I think about me as a creative, us as creatives, like what do things that I need, or I'm frustrated about something. So I'm like, how can I solve that problem and create, whether it's, graphic design. I think that a lot of things as startup creatives is DIY, right? Do it yourself. You have to figure it out. So we can create platforms and just resources like basic graphic design. I think that's a lot of like events. I would be interested in something like that because I look for things like that. So, or if it's wellness for creatives, how do you unwind? How do you just, take care of yourself?
Let me see if I'm hearing this correctly. Mm-hmm. You want to be a brand that's a solution provider. It's a go-to solution provider, maybe even a thought leader for creatives.
Yes.
Is that a resource? I feel right to only put words in your mouth.
Yes.
You want to be a resource for creatives.
Yes.
Okay. And one of the ways that you'll do that is in the form of events.
Yes. And programs.
Events, programs. Let's talk about that a little more. Okay. What kind of programs do you have in mind?
So I think what I've been thinking about lately is what does creativity, to be creative, what does that mean? Are we all creative? So certain programs that kind of help people kind of map that out and develop. What is creative development? What does that look like? Because I think a lot of people are like, I'm not creative, and it doesn't have to be artistic all the time. There are creative solutions that solve a lot of problems in the world. So you think about interdisciplinary things. So I'm really interested in how we use creativity to solve problems, how we use creativity to entertain, how we use creativity to, make our relationships and our family life better. That's what I think about. Yeah.
So events, programs.
Mm-hmm. And I would say maybe creative development as well.
Okay. Creative development.
Yes.
So that was can you give that a little bit more definition as well?
Yeah. So I think about, as a dancer, we develop our craft. Mm-hmm. We're in class. We have to do all these things to condition our bodies, to develop our techniques. So if you are identifying as a creative, how do you develop? Is it a skill that you develop? Is it something that's innate? Is it something, and if it is innate, how do you really access it and utilize it? Because I feel like a lot of people, it lies dormant, and I'm not creative, but it's like, really, we are. Mm-hmm. So it's like, how do you really develop that? So I'm interested in programming like that, creating things like that where people can say, wow, and how they can use that in any field. Like as a teacher, as an educator, you need to be creative with how you relay information to your students so that they'll be interested and it'll be comprehended, right? As a culinary artist, you need to be creative with how you plate your food and how you mix flavors and things. So, I think about that. So I'm still kind of figuring out what is creative development. I don't know if that exists, but I've been developing as a artist. I know there's artist development,
Love it. I think we've got it, right? So now we've kind of got your goals mapped out, but let's talk about just a little bit more about what that looks like to you. Okay. So you want to be producing events,
Yes.
Quarterly, annually?
I think quarterly. Definitely quarterly.
Okay. It's good.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you want to be producing content, I believe.
Yes.
Correct. So content.
Yes.
So that is more frequent.
More frequent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Weekly, something like that.
I mean, and you think about social media
daily.
and engage, right?
Yes.
engagement. I think we post things and sometimes people are responding and then other times they don't. So it's like, well, what really, when you're scrolling, what's captivating, what gets people like, I want to engage in this conversation. I want to engage in whatever they're producing, so I'm also looking at more engagement of our audience. I think that helps to really identify, well, who are you really targeting? Who is it that you're speaking to? Who is the audience?
Perfect. Yeah. Exactly. Because of all of the different creative fields and functions that you're describing, you could be talking to so many people.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. We'd be talking to amateurs, to pros, to choreographers, to writers, to graphic designers.
Exactly.
I think for this particular exercise, you may want to try it. Let's try and pick one.
Okay.
Right? Is it, you can only do so many things at once. Right? And this is, creatives, we're all famous for this, where we try and do too many things and it's at the expense of all of them, right? Mm-hmm. But if we can pick one nice big project that you're excited about, that you feel like could maybe generate some income for you, build the brand, then I think that would be a good thing to look at. So do you have any plans for things that you want to roll out that we could put that in the focus of who that ideal customer might be for?
Well, I guess our next event that we're planning, because we do it annually, and every year we try to do something different and appease to different audiences. So possibly, I would say our annual event. So that's kind of the next thing, and we're always looking to level up. Okay, we did this year. What can we do differently? We usually get feedback forms to kind of hear from people. So I think that's something we're definitely always actively working towards.
Good. Okay. So you want to, your next event, what do you have in mind for it?
May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we're collaborating with, she's a therapist and kind of working on a event, mental health and burnout for creatives.
Wow. Right. Excellent. Okay. Keep going. What do you have in mind for it?
So, you're talking about specific people, like you're saying that creatives is general. So let's talk about ourselves. Like, we're dancers, we're artists, but mostly dancers first. Like, people who use their voice or their bodies for work. So can we go there?
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. Okay. Yeah. So it's mental health awareness for dancers.
Well,
am I saying that right?
In general, I was talking about people who use their bodies, like football players or any athletes.
For performance-based
work.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's going to be interesting because we're talking to football players, we're talking to basketball players, gymnasts, physical therapists. Okay. Lots to narrow down.
Right. If we're narrowing it down, yes, because I know I use my body. And we're talking about being burnt out and mental awareness. So that's something I want to know. That's something I want to explore. So.
Sure. As a dancer.
Right. So then to narrow it down, why don't we say for dancers and maybe fitness professionals?
Yeah.
Because we're both of those. So maybe that it can target that. And we know a lot of people that are dancers that are fitness professionals, and how active everything is performance. Like, we have to get up, we have to instruct, we have to do this, so it's very taxing. And what does that look like teaching here? And then you have to go to this next class. So talking about the burnout and the stress and strain of that.
So that's a really good example, because what you're describing, if you try and do both, then you need to still segment them into two. If you're talking about a physical therapist and a dancer.
Okay.
Right? Because there might be there's some segment where they're in between the two, there's both, but in general, they're going to have different messages. Different messaging is going to appeal to the point where you may want to choose one and consider that is your ideal client profile.
Right.
And then gear your materials towards it, because I know I'm sure just in your experience, you've met some dancers who are completely different than physical therapists. Right. Whereas, and vice versa. Right. So there may be some that are both, but if you try and do an event for both, then you may end up really confusing folks between the two. Right. So that being said, the first thing I know that you're both, right? But as a dancer, that was your first interest. And so let's talk about that. Do you think that a dancer would be appropriate for this particular style event, what you had for your vision.
Yes.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And then next question, because we're talking about marketing, we're talking about business. Do you think they can afford it?
We're thinking about creative ways to present this. So we were talking about like a virtual Zoom type of thing. And it's like, if that's the case, do we charge, or is it donations, or like, how do we navigate this time? I think in general, if we weren't in this like weird, awkward situation that we're in.
Right as we film this, we're just starting the COVID crisis.
Right.
Yes.
Social distancing is just becoming a thing so we did the Corona shake to say hello, and things are changing. It's valid. We want this to have some evergreen appeal, but crisis has happened.
Right.
And going virtual needs to be a consideration, and it gives you, now it's local reach, but it could be regional, international, etc. And it's certainly something worth considering. And when we talk about speaking specifically to your ideal client profile, then we have the opportunity to say, well, how big is that? So let's explore that a little bit. And so when we talk about dancers, there's professional, there's amateur. I'm assuming that we want to try and go more on the professional side.
Yes.
Right? Okay. And then on the professional side, do we want to niche down even deeper? For example, there's choreographers, right? There's choreographers, there's directors, and so let's talk about that. And what do you think? More specific.
Well, I think it's hand in hand. A lot of performers are choreographers because we have to be the / artists. We're performers, but we're also this. So I think it's not unnatural to like, I'm a performer, but I also might choreograph something next week. So maybe is it performers and choreographers, or is it, what do you think?
It just gets really detailed and it gets complicated. I think it really
let's streamline it for you. So if you want to do an event, you want to do you're thinking virtual, right? And if we're going virtual, then it's going to cost you something, right? So and you want to provide some value. You're talking about doing maybe an hour, 2 hour long event, something like a workshop like for choreographers, for dancers, whatever we decide, or whatever you decide. But putting a dollar amount on that, like let's just say, I'm not suggesting this, but if we say $20, right? If you say $20, then okay, well, I guess dancers the average dancer can probably afford this, whether they're pro or amateur, somewhere between. And now if we start adding zeros, right, then all of a sudden it changes that. How, right? So what would be a good goal for you? Let's say that our aim is 100 people. It's an arbitrary number just so that we can do easy math.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get 100. Use 100 people as an example. Then if we did $20, right? Then we're talking about $2,000 to come through as your initial test. So does this feel like it's in line with what might work?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. So then we're looking at dancers who are comfortable paying $20, sort of equivalent to a local concert, if you will. Right. And then with a matter of building value. So I'll let you all, that's your own exercise, is just how to build that value.
Exactly.
But in looking at where the dancers are to get you 100, right? We want to get 100, so we need to show to well over 1,000. Right. We need to get to well over 1,000 people, just so they can see your marketing, to see the messaging, and then it's going to be less than 1 out of 10 people that see it are going to come.
Right.
Ends up being more like 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000. Right. So let's talk a little bit about who that person is and where they are.
Okay.
So they're dancers. How old is the typical dancer? Well, let's go by the average person that you would want to direct messaging at.
Let's say like 21 to 30,
40.
21 to 40.
Yeah.
21 to 40. Okay. So 21 to 40.
Yeah.
Mostly men or women?
It's really changed. There are a lot of male dancers. That's why. But
that's great.
I still think that it would be female dominated.
Okay. Because we're circling around, or we're narrowing in. We want to reach 10,000 people. Right. We want to get your information in front of 10,000 people. And if we're going for 10,000 male dancers, and I know because I used to do work in Los Angeles, and I remember that it's still female dominated there. There's plenty of men dancers there, but it would be challenging. It would be more challenging to find 10,000 male dancers, but with females, it's a little easier, right? Especially if we're looking at the lens of the whole country. I'm assuming that we're going virtual. English speaking. Okay. So we're narrowing deeper down. Now, the other demographics that we can talk through is, let's talk a little bit about their jobs. Now, that might sound obvious, but I know that a lot of dancers do have other jobs. And so why don't we talk about that a little bit? Sure. So ideal client, and we're trying to reach 10,000. Do you think that they are professional dancers on is that what's on their resume, or are they do they have other jobs that might be worth looking at?
Well, I think the reality is that most performing artists working actively in the field have other jobs, unless you're like on Lion King or something like that. It's not that one gig, and a lot of things are gigs, so it's temporary. You don't know when the next
company there.
It's still not.
They might work another job. Or teach other places. So
typically, a lot of dancers fall into fitness, hospitality,
education.
What else? That's pretty much it, right? Yeah.
Would you say that one more time?
So fitness.
So
fitness, wellness, programs. Hot foods and hospitality.
Sure.
And education.
The other thing that I'm noticing is that it seems like we're more focusing even deeper on semi-pro. Okay? It doesn't sound like you're talking to the people that are in the Lion King necessarily. Maybe a little bit, but to find 10,000 of those that have the time and the bandwidth and the interest in joining something like this, I don't know. I mean, you tell me, but it seems like if we're going for an ideal client to talk to and find 10,000 of, then it sounds like semi-pro to me. Does that feel correct to you, or do you want to target this more towards pro?
Well, depends on how you define semi-pro and professional, because we work a lot of professional gigs and we are professional performing artists. So I think
full time.
Okay, full time.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize.
Yeah. I didn't mean that. No, because no. Right, it does change. Right, because a lot of our work is part time, and it is contracts and things like that end, and then you have to start another thing. So, maybe.
Because even if you are on Broadway, the show might end and you have to find
another gig. Yeah.
So it's still part-time.
Yeah.
So let me tell you why that's important. This is why that's important. Because you're getting into the psychographics, if you will, which gives you more about the emotional well-being of these people, right? Because they're juggling.
Right.
They're juggling. They've got multiple jobs, and everybody can relate to that.
Right.
But it helps you in the messaging because you can be more empathic. You can be more empathic. You can help them understand when you're developing that content. You're seeing their perspective as very busy. They have to juggle multiple things, and then you can help them relieve that stress.
Yeah. Right. Then definitely, I think that target. For sure. So possibly not the full time.
Sure.
So the jugglers, I don't know what we call them. The jugglers. The semi.
And how about some of the more other demographics? What are they're typically making? What level of income do you think?
The semi-pro or the full-time?
We're talking about ideal client profile. Whether it's 65, 85, whatever it is, right? You all can write that down and we don't have to necessarily disclose that.
Because
it does range, yeah. And with all of the different jobs, it's so hard to kind of guesstimate
Yeah,
the
but
ideal.
I know people that make 80,000, 90,000, and we're doing the same show. I mean,
Yeah, so
I mean,
even if we have a starter range of like 50 to 80,
Yeah.
something like that, we're targeting somewhere between that, maybe 65.
I would say
70.
30 to 80.
Yeah, 30 to 80.
Because a
There you
lot
go.
of- yeah.
30 to 80.
Because
That's really
hospitality,
helpful.
fitness,
30
Yeah.
to 80.
you're lucky in education if it was there. And
Education. Yeah, I know we can
Yeah.
ghost it. Good. Okay. Well, the other things that you consider here is what kind of entertainment they're taking in. Obviously, dancing is kind of an obvious one, but it's helpful that you have these peripherals too, because you've got some of their peripheral interests that you can sort of carve out subsections for, right? So right out the gate, you have fitness. So how do you keep your mind and body fit when you're a dancer? Hospitality, how do you keep yourself nourished and well rested even? Education, how do you stay sharp and what's important to keep your mind healthy in all ways when you're a dancer?
Right.
So you can see how each one of these subsections is really helpful to talk through and document. And then it's going to become important again when you're advertising, because now with Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and all that, you add the interests in there,
Okay.
right? So now you've got the semblance of a footprint that you can use to build out campaigns and start to get to know your customer even deeper, right? So I think that's probably a good starting point, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Was that helpful?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, perfect. We did a ideal client profiling exercise where you start looking through the lens of your goals, because depending on what your goal is in terms of your product, your service, your project, event in this case, there's going to be a very different kind of ideal client that you are selling to. And at a high level, it's just documenting the demographics and the psychographics, but getting much, much deeper. And to do so, rather than going back through it now, you can go to spiralmarketing.com, go to the show notes page for this episode. It will be episode 45. And you can download a free worksheet that you can use to mark up all of the different categories and questions.